The DNA that screams in silence. Imagine a bustling city, alive with light, movement, and voices. Now imagine it abandoned. Not after an earthquake, not after a plague, but after all the men who built it vanished one by one. Not by accident, but by design. Generation after generation, wiped out deliberately, methodically, and then forgotten. The only thing left to remember them is your blood. Thousands of years ago, at the dawn of what we now call civilization, something horrific happened. We don't know exactly when. We don't know who started it. There are no names, no chronicles, no funeral bells. But we know this much. At one point, across an enormous swath of the ancient world, from Europe to Asia, from the Middle East to North Africa, almost every male lineage vanished, erased from existence. This isn't mythology. It's not a legend. It's cold clinical science, etched in our modern DNA. A silent scar hidden deep within our chromosomes. Roughly 95% of all male bloodlines disappeared within a shockingly short window during the Neolithic era. The Y chromosome, passed only from father to son, collapsed. No one knew until now. How could such a catastrophic genetic event leave no trace in the written record? What kind of violence could be so systematic, so vast, and so final that no words survive to describe it? The answer's chilling. History's not written in ink. It was written in death, in slaughter, in biological selection, and most disturbingly, it was written into us. In recent decades, geneticists, archaeologists, and scientists from around the globe have gathered around one haunting question. Who killed all those men, and why? What you're about to hear isn't science fiction. It's not an urban myth. It's a documented scientific discovery, one that has reshaped our understanding of early human history. We'll uncover how this genetic collapse was discovered, the role Neolithic violence played, how women were taken as trophies while men were executed as enemies, how the first war-based cultures emerged, and why this may be humanity's first recorded act of global genocide. This is the story of a massacre with no name, but with lasting consequences. A massacre silent, but universal. A massacre that shaped us and still lives on in every child born today. This is the dark legacy hidden in our DNA. This is the untold side of human history. The vanishing bloodlines. It began not with bones nor with ruins, but with data. Deep inside genomic archives, where researchers sift through billions of genetic sequences, a pattern began to emerge, a silence in the Y chromosome. At first, it seemed like an anomaly, but then more patterns aligned, more gaps appeared. Modern men across the world shared something strange. Their Y chromosome diversity was astonishingly low, far lower than what should exist if all male lineages had passed down naturally over time. Scientists ran the numbers, checked again and again, and what they found was chilling. Somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 years ago, 19 out of every 20 male lineages vanished. And it wasn't just in one region, not just one people. This was a near-global event striking Europe, the Middle East, Asia, and parts of North Africa almost simultaneously. And yet, something else was missing. Because while male diversity had collapsed, the female lineages remained intact. Mitochondrial DNA, the genetic code passed down through mothers, showed no similar bottleneck. So what could that possibly mean? If it had been a plague or a climate disaster or a famine, both sexes would have been affected equally. If it had been nature, nature wouldn't have chosen sides. But here the devastation was surgical, male-specific. It pointed to something far darker, a world where men were not merely dying, they were being eliminated. And the only explanation that fit the evidence? Deliberate, targeted violence. Not just one battle, not just one war, but a systemic, widespread purge, one that unfolded over generations, erasing fathers, sons, and entire male bloodlines. Not at once, but slowly, methodically, persistently. A genocide written not in ink, but in chromosomes. And though the past left no written record of this war, our DNA never forgot. It still carries the ghost of that reckoning, a genetic echo of an ancient silence, where once stood men with names, with families, with futures, now only a blank space in the genome. Bones don't lie. As the DNA whispered, the earth screamed. For years, archaeologists had been unearthing the same story again and again, only they didn't realize it. Mass graves, crushed skulls, villages burned and abandoned, children buried with arrows still lodged in their ribs. The Neolithic period, once romanticized as the dawn of peaceful farming societies, began to look less like a golden age and more like a battlefield. In Europe alone, over 250 archaeological sites dated to this period show signs of extreme violence. That's not an exception, that's a pattern. In one study of 2,300 early agricultural skeletons, more than 10% showed weapon-inflicted trauma, from clubs, spears, or stone axes. Most were men and women cut down not in open war but in raids. Sudden, brutal, personal. Another site in Spain revealed that 23% of skeletons bore violent injuries, especially adolescent adult males. Some had multiple wounds, suggesting not just one battle but a lifetime of recurring violence. A boy survives one raid only to die in the next. And yet, even these statistics underestimate the horror. Why? Because most fatal attacks don't leave marks on bone. A spear to the gut, an axe to the neck, a fire set while the victims sleep, even a mass drowning. None of it scars the skeleton. Some victims simply vanish without a trace, except in the gene pool. What survived were patterns, and those patterns pointed to a world soaked in blood. The time when being male and of the wrong tribe, clan, or lineage was a death sentence. But bones do more than tell us that people died. Sometimes they tell us how. And in the next chapter, we descend into the most terrifying pits of all, where people weren't just killed, they were hunted. The Valley of Slaughter. There's a village in southern Germany, peaceful now, but over 7,000 years ago, its soil drank the blood of an atrocity so brutal, it defies imagination. The place is called Talheim, or more hauntingly, the Death Pit. Beneath the earth, archaeologists found the remains of 34 people, men, women, and children. None of them showed signs of defense. No broken forearms, no struggle. They weren't warriors, they were running. Their killers struck with horrifying precision. Nearly every blow was aimed at the skull. Some victims had sharp wounds from adze-like tools. Others were crushed by blunt trauma. Only 3 had been shot with arrows. The rest were executed up close. Among the dead were 16 children, 9 adult men and 7 older women. But strangely, younger women were missing. They weren't spared, they were taken. This pattern repeats again and again across Neolithic Europe. At Scheltz in Austria, another fortified settlement, archaeologists unearthed the remains of over 200 victims. Their arms and legs had been severed, heads found apart from bodies. The attackers weren't just killers, they were butchers. And again, young women and preteens were notably absent. It wasn't just murder, it was abduction, enslavement, reproductive control. But the most horrifying sight of all lies at Herxheim, a massive village surrounded by more than 80 bone-filled pits dated between 5300 and 4950 BC. Inside, the remains of over 1,000 individuals, possibly up to 1,500. Newborns, children, elders, all slaughtered. The bones were deliberately broken. Skulls were split and defleshed, brains removed, tongues cut out. Many bodies were cooked. Some were even spit roasted. Others had bones turned into cups or displayed on stakes at the village gates. Herxheim wasn't a place of refuge. It was a machine of death. And terrifyingly, this village wasn't destroyed by outsiders. It was likely run by the very people doing the killing. How did such cruelty become normal? Some think it was ritual. Others believe it was warfare taken to its most extreme. Whatever the reason, it showed one thing clearly. Humanity had crossed a line. We weren't just fighting for survival anymore. We were fighting for domination, for blood, for legacy. And behind every broken skull lay a silent message. You will not be remembered. But the killers failed, because today we remember, and the bones still speak. The rise of blood and walls. The Neolithic Revolution sounds like a triumph, and in some ways it was. We learned to tame the land. We planted seeds, raised animals, built permanent homes. Human population soared, villages grew, civilization began to flicker into existence. Something else grew with it. Paranoia, greed, and fear. For the first time in history, humans had something to lose. Food stores, land, livestock, daughters. No longer nomads, we were now targets. stationary, visible, and vulnerable. Every neighboring village became a potential threat, every field a reason to kill. And with stability came organization. Clans could now form armies. They could forge alliances, plot raids, defend fortresses. Violence wasn't just random anymore, it became systematic. But here's where the story takes an even darker turn. As farming societies expanded, many began to adopt patrilineal structures, tribal systems in which men ruled, men inherited, and male bloodlines dictated power. And that shift made the male line a target. In these clans, women moved freely between groups through marriage or abduction, but men stayed as warriors, leaders, and symbols of lineage. So when the clans went to war, they didn't just kill fighters, they erased the bloodline itself. Fathers, sons, uncles, nephews, all exterminated. And when one male lineage was wiped out, its territory, women, and resources were absorbed by the victor. Y chromosome diversity shrank, not by accident, but by design. This wasn't madness, it was strategy. Some researchers call it the Neolithic Purge. Not a single war, but 1,000 small ones. Death by 1,000 spears over decades or centuries. And it worked. One by one, weaker clans vanished. Their genes never passed on. Their names, if they ever had any, died in whispers. What was left were the victors. A handful of successful male lineages that dominated the genetic landscape for generations. To this day, many men alive share Y chromosome patterns traceable to just a few ancestral lines. The rest, wiped from the record. The silent theory. Not everyone agrees that a bloodbath shaped our DNA. Some scientists believe the truth might be less violent, but no less tragic. What if, instead of a slaughter, the Y chromosome collapse came from something much quieter? Enter the theory of lineal fission, a slow process by which early patrilineal clans simply split apart. As populations grew, family groups divided and founded new settlements nearby. These new clans, all descended from a single common male ancestor, shared the same Y chromosome. Over time, environmental pressures like drought, disease, or famine could have wiped out some of these subgroups while others thrived. There were no battles, no mass graves, just the gradual disappearance of unlucky lineages. Natural selection played out over generations. But this doesn't mean it was peaceful. Even without warfare, there was reproductive inequality. Some men, clan leaders, warriors, or chieftains had many children. Others had none. And in societies that increasingly centered around powerful male lineages, a few men fathered most of the next generation. One genetic study showed that nearly 8% of men in Asia today might descend from a single common male ancestor, possibly Genghis Khan. Now imagine a similar pattern but happening 6,000 years ago, with hundreds of minor warlords, each dominating their region, each silencing the DNA of weaker men. A soft genocide, not with blood but with exclusion. So which theory's right? The truth is, both may be. History rarely chooses just one path. Some regions likely experienced waves of catastrophic violence complete with skull cults, massacres, and abductions. Others may have seen the slow suffocation of diversity through isolation, hierarchy, and environmental disaster. But together they led to the same chilling result. Genetic bottleneck so profound its scars are still written in the chromosomes of men today. When the killing finally slowed. So how did it end? How did humanity move from skull-crushing death pits and burning villages to cities, laws, and diplomacy? The truth? It didn't end. It evolved. As Neolithic societies grew, so did their needs. Food, water, stability. Violence became costly. You couldn't rebuild your fields if half your men were dead. You couldn't defend your walls if your youth had been slaughtered the year before. So slowly, painfully, necessity carved out a new path. The rise of complex societies brought with it new tools, trade, communication, mutual interests, writing, religion, diplomacy. Settlements began to specialize. Farming intensified. Some villages became hubs, then towns, then the first flickers of city-states. Where once spears settled disputes, now agreements did. And yet the violence never vanished, it simply changed shape. Instead of intertribal massacres, we had organized warfare. Armies, kings, conquest. The scale expanded, but the blood still flowed. The difference was that now we could grow faster than we killed. Population growth outpaced death, and that made the world look more peaceful, even if the fire never truly went out. Over time, as empires rose and borders were drawn, the rules changed. You couldn't just raid a neighbor without consequences. Eventually, society developed systems of justice, even morality, that tried imperfectly to limit violence. And in the last century, we've seen something unprecedented: a sharp decline in wars between nations. Since World War I, the number of new conflicts per year has steadily dropped. The 20th century was bloody, but statistically, we now live in the most peaceful era in recorded human history. Lifespans have tripled, skull cults are gone, skin breakers and bone boilers exist only in museum cases and cautionary tales. We still carry the scars, but we also carry the memory, and perhaps this is why we've come so far. The shadow that still walks with us. Close your eyes for a moment. Now imagine all the men you know: brothers, fathers, friends, sons. Then erase 19 out of 20 of them. Gone. That is what our ancestors lived through. A nightmare so profound it wasn't written in scrolls or carved in stone. It was carved into our genetic code. This isn't just history. It's inside you, inside me, inside every man alive today. We are the descendants of survivors, of warriors who stood atop burning ruins, of clans that made unthinkable choices, of women who endured the collapse of worlds and built new ones from ash. The Neolithic bottleneck was not a single moment, it was a shudder in time, a long stream of chaos etched into the double helix of human life. But perhaps the darkest truth is, we almost forgot it happened. Without genetics, without archaeology, without the silent testimony of shattered bones, we would have never known how close our species came to losing its reflection. And now that we know, we must ask ourselves, what kind of ancestors will we become? Will we repeat the shadows of the past? Or will we become the first generation in history to truly remember? Because memory, like DNA, must be passed on, not just through blood, but through story. This was one of them. Thank you for watching Prehistorers Extinct. If this story opened your eyes, leave a like, subscribe, and share this forgotten truth. We bring to light the secrets buried in bones and the stories written in silence. Until next time, keep exploring the past to understand who we really are.